Just judging me, get out of my life. But we all withdraw. We hide our motives. We don't want our motives to be examined. No one has the right to know what's in our heart. And anybody that dares challenge us or ask us, we get offended by and we withdraw. Did not Jesus said that this is the judgment? The light came into the earth, but the world hated the light, lest their deeds or their motives be exposed. And those who walked in darkness, they pulled away. But those who walk in light come to the light, that their deeds may be affirmed or manifest or verified or validated that I have been honest, I have been forthright from the beginning. But you see, examining your motive causes us to be defensive. We get defensive in our homes, and we judge each other's motives and so forth, and so we get really barky about that kind of thing. And there's a third thing that happens, and when you are blamed for something, and this is the area of meekness and knowledge, and meekness has to do with knowledge because Jesus said, learn of me, know me, for I am meek. To know me is to be meek. To know about me doesn't necessarily make you meek. So the church should be characterized by meekness, because that's who our master is. A horse of mine should be characterized as a horse that always yields quickly and always knows what to do by his feet. And any horse that doesn't know that and isn't characterized by that kind of suppleness isn't my horse. And you would be disappointed in this guy that calls himself a horse trainer if the proof is not in the pudding, it's not in the yieldedness of that horse. And any place there's a point of resistance, a gristle spot, a brace in a horse is a point that needs to be worked on. But man, when it comes to helping that horse's feet move and to take more responsibility, every brace and every reason comes up. I can't do that. That's too much. You don't understand. And this anger rises to the surface. It rises in all of our lives when our motives are examined and when we're told that we're being irresponsible, we're blamed for something that's missing. And then when you're under unfair authority and they seem to be ungrateful or too harsh or difficult to get along with or demanding in their expectations, it solicits, draws forth every ounce of rebellion. Stuff that you thought you had dealt with when you were a teenager or quit in the past. But being treated unfairly at home produces it too. It produces it in our heart, and then it produces it in our mouth. And we think, boy, I can't wait till I get out of here. Or you ought to know what you're like to live with. Or you ought to get a taste of your own medicine. And even if you don't punish that person, friends, remember the most powerful weapon on the face of the earth is the power to withdraw your spirit and your fellowship from people. And you do that on a regular basis. Why? It draws forth that self-preservation in our life. And it's a knee-jerk reaction. So when we're treated unkindly and unfairly, it produces this layer of protectionism. And then there's this thing about a race. And when you've done all and you're tired, and people come along and say, how come this isn't done? Where have you been all day? Haven't you done anything? You want to slug them, don't you? Sure you do. And you want to tell them, where have you been? When I've been on the way. And you see, when you have already sweat and you've already given a lot, and then people expect more of you, everything rises up to want to quit. Quitting is so natural to the human race. In fact, Hebrews 11 labels this thing so clearly. And seeing we're surrounded by such a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every encumbrance and the sin, which does so easily beset us. The sin is quitting. Not finishing, not following through, not bringing to closure those things in our lives. And boy, that's a difficult thing in our life. And whether it's even an argument or a difficult situation, not bringing to closure, to rest. Motivation is designed by momentum. And the more things you bring to closure, the higher, more effective your motivation is. And the more things you leave unfinished in your life, friends, the more it robs you of a future and a hope and a dynamic and a motivation. And the sin which does so easily beset us. And let us run with endurance. You see, endurance comes from God. It doesn't come from just a good idea or the right people or good circumstances. It comes from God. It's a gift of God's Spirit to persevere and to endure and to do the things that are above our fleshly needs. But it pushes that quitting up to my surface. And God lets all those things be flushed to the surface. And then, of course, when we're expected to do something that's above, or it's a demand of excellence, We come up with a list of excuses why we can't do it, and nobody ever tells me, and how come I'm not informed, and how come you treat me, you leave these things at the last minute, you want me to rush the job I'm rushing now or the one I'm rushing. And we have all these excuses, I'm only human, and so forth. And wow, that really, and you know what? Sometimes they are unreasonable, but God calls us to something else. And we have excuses, every last one of why we can't do something, why we can't become something, why we won't be there. And we always have a list ready to our making, just in case we want to whip a few out. And then, of course, if you've been involved in ministry, I love the ministry, don't get me wrong. I just hate people. People stink. People are irritable. People are impatient. People are ungrateful. The church is not made up of good-looking people like you and dressed-up people. The church is made up of snotty noses and dirty diapers. Real families are. And it never quits, does it? No, the nose quits. God got all backwards. My feet smell and my nose runs. I don't know how that works. Yeah, we know that, don't we? You see, God, and the body is unseemly. It's always full of messes and brokenness and unfinished lives and newcomers and rebels, and it's a hospital for disease. Sometimes you just get worn out and you get tired of them. The ungrateful people, and they don't take your advice. And you know they only get 10% of your best sermon. If you get 10. At least get a good nap if you don't get 10. And nobody ever gets but a sentence. Wow, that's a lot of work for a sentence. Yeah. But a man has joy in an apt answer. A word is enough to change a life. Because you don't need me. You just need God's word spoken in a right need in your heart. So we have all these things that we react to, and all these things that says they aren't going to do you any good. And God says, I hate all those things. You know why? Because they're expressions of pride. Now God said one more thing to this people. And these were people back in the Old Testament. And there were people called Israel. I know that many of you know the Old Testament. Some of you may not. So the people, the chosen people, were called Israelites. And he selected them. They were slaves for 430 years in the land called Egypt, which we know today. And they were under the domain of Pharaoh, then referred to parallel to Satan. And they were slaves in sin, dead, unable to respond. And God sent a leader, the type, Moses, to be like Jesus, to show them that he had a promised land, a hope, and a future for them. And he was going to take them from where they were to where they could be. Now, the promised land isn't heaven. That's different. Why? Because this promised land had lots of problems in it. It wasn't about, we have three parts, our body, our soul, and our spirit, for our reference this morning. Well, our body's going to decay and stay here on earth, so it's not about redeeming our body. Our spirit is eternally saved, and we're sealed by the Holy Spirit. So that concept of being saved and sealed by the Spirit is clear there. But then there's our soul, which consists of our mind, will, and emotion. And just because you get saved doesn't mean you don't have a desire for something illicit or some drug or some addiction you've had always. And just because you're saved doesn't mean any of that goes away. But it means now I have the privilege of appropriating through my spirit the truths that will transform my mind and my will and my emotions, and my body will follow. But if I only feed my flesh, then my spirit will be weak, and my flesh, my thoughts will be on myself, my emotions will be about myself, my decisions will be weak and aimless, and I will follow my flesh. I might be a saved, sealed individual, but I'm weak and incompetent. So God says, I'm going to make this land for you, and I'm going to give this all to you. I'm going to give you life abundant. Yay! We all say amen. Oh, excuse me. By the way, there's a journey you must take first, because the journey is going to prepare you. It's not a mistake you spent 40 years. It took that much preparation to really help you become powerful. In that process, you became saved. In that process, I took you to the wilderness where you learned to hear my voice and make your body a living temple of mine. And in that process, I prepared you and helped you study and know my word. And then I'm going to take you to where it's all pleasant and everything goes just absolutely A1. You idiots. No. In fact, I want to tell you, there are 7 nations greater and mightier than you that are going to leave right there. They're more powerful than you. They're stronger than you. They'll defeat you every day of the week. And I'm going to leave them there for your benefit. We scratch our head at that one. That didn't fit with abundant life, did it? No, ask the 1849 gold rush, who said, honey, I'm leaving, and when I strike it rich, I'll send for you. And they never heard from that man again in their life. Ask the immigrants who perished in boats off of our shores, who came to the land of milk and honey and never were admitted to America. Ask the folk who are coyoted in and are left to die. Somehow this dreamland wasn't what it was supposed to be. It wasn't what I imagined. And all of us assign our imaginations to God's land of milk and honey. And we're often disappointed in God in the process. And our theology wrestles with that. How come, God, if you're so good, you're so powerful, you're so full of grace, and you're so giving, how come I have these things? So he says, I'm going to leave these nations in your life. And he goes out and he lines them right out. And they have 7 major battles in the Old Testament. And I want to talk to you just briefly about them, because the first battle they face is called the land of Jericho. And in that land they marched in following Moses, all dressed up and ready for church. And on the first day they did really well. Joshua said, don't say one thing, just march around and say, now this city was an impregnable fortress, so there's no way. They didn't have the weapons, they didn't have the military training, they didn't have the resources, so there's no way this thing would fall into their hands. Just shut up and follow me. That's hard to do some days, isn't it? Well, not day 1, no. And day 2 is not bad. But nothing moved, nothing changed. In day 3, and of course the guys up on the wall aren't silent anymore either. They're going, what are you going to do? We're squished to death. And they start flinging their garbage over the walls, I'm sure, because Satan always in his pride always goes too far. I'm sure they're flinging garbage out. Just keep walking and march. You know how stupid kids are. Boom! Say day 7, it explodes. The victory's theirs because they stayed faithful. Despite no evidence at all for 6 days and 6 times around the last term. No evidence God was even there. Well, that's hard to do. That's quite a challenge when you think about that. Being mocked more and more and more. But they stayed faithful and there was a victory. So they go to the next area and they find an enemy and they send their soldiers. It's not a big town, so they just send 3,600 soldiers up there. And boom, they lose. 36 men die. They're killed. God, what'd you do this for? This isn't right. This is wrong. Here I am honoring you and giving my money, and I'm just growing, and everything's going wrong. It's so confusing to the human soul. And God said, Joshua, quit pouting. Get up, cowboy up, Joshua. Mount up. This isn't about you, Joshua. There's sin in the camp. Because they were told not to take anything from the city of Jericho, and one guy named Achan stole some things, and he buried them deep. You see, God won't bless you publicly until you're clean privately. And so he was dealing with them on that basis. And so anyhow, they have a victory finally, and things go on just fine. And then these guys come from a ways away. And you can see their wranglers from a long ways away because they just look terrible. They look like real cowboys. And their hats are disheveled, and their donkeys look weary, and they're dusty, and their wineskins are parched, and the guys look like they've been on the trail for 100 miles. And they said, we've heard about you from a distance, and we've come to make treaty with you. And of course, Israel was allowed to make treaty with any of the surrounding nations, so it wasn't inappropriate that they'd say, yes, we'll make treaty with you, and you can be our neighbor, and we're here. And Joshua never checked in with God. And as soon as he said, we swear a covenant to you that you may have your life, and we'll treaty with you, and we'll be glad to be your neighbor, suddenly they realized they were only 3 miles away, and they deceived him. Joshua had already sworn an oath to him. When God revealed it to him, he was in trouble. It's another test, you see. It's so easy. In fact, I remember asking a godly